All right, hello, welcome back. This time we're going to be jumping into some plotting and making charts in Excel, this modulate stuff here. And so we'll start with just understanding the different charts in Excel. Um, so in Excel, one of the big things you can do is make these graphs and charts, plotting things, and it's a lot easier to look at that data graphically than numerically. So if you have just a big table of numbers here of like the finance sort of income of a company over time, you might be interested in the trend, like not just what it was on a particular week, but how it was changing over time. And so on this graph, you can kind of see, oh, look, like the income of Yahoo started declining in July, and then it started going up in October, and we can maybe make a prediction about what will happen next year. And so that's kind of the fundamental, like it's easy, you can communicate a lot of information that way. But there's a lot of different types of charts that we're going to use. So we'll kind of look at a few here just to start it off. This is a bar chart example that is good at kind of comparing like quantities of different categories against each other. So you could look at your monthly expenses and your budget and sort of see where food relative to gas, entertainment, utilities, and kind of where they all line up. And you can just kind of look and see, okay, my smallest is this miscellaneous category and entertainment. My biggest is gas. Maybe I need a more fuel efficient car, or maybe that's just how much I spend on gas, whatever. So that's a bar chart. You can also do this sort of like stacked bar chart where you sort of nestle, if you have two different kinds of categories you're dealing with, one could be like time, your budget changes month to month, and the different categories in your budget. You can look at those together and say, okay, in each month, let me stack up all the categories, and the different colors represent the different like type of purchase, and then what's split up in the bars is over time. So you can see how spending changes over time and still break down by category. Pretty cool. But another common type of plot to do other things is if you have a bunch of like statistical data and you want to look at sort of an aggregate like stats of something, you might use this bar and whisker plot. So if you look here, we have like a bunch of data of 3 different schools, their win rate in 3 different sports for 10 years. And you might be curious, like, how does each school do in each sport? And how consistent is it? How much can we predict its performance? What the bar and whisker plot does is it puts information like the median and the mean from some of our previous videos, and the sort of variation in a sense, kind of like standard deviation, as well as just where the outliers are. So what we're seeing here is the x's are the median values for each one. The line is the mean or average value for each one. And the box kind of represents like a range of things that are like kind of reasonable without outliers. So sometimes it's like a 2 standard deviation range. Sometimes it's like an upper and lower quartile, 25% to 75% range. In this case, I think it's a 2 standard deviation. So 95% of the time it falls into that box. And then the outliers are the little like lines at the top. Those are the whiskers. And that's where the name comes from. But you can kind of see, like, if we compare, say, baseball, school B is doing the worst pretty consistently. And school A is pretty consistently doing better, but sometimes they're worse. You know, they have those outliers down below. And then school C is sort of in between, but has a lot more variation because that box is bigger. That's maybe more clear on like soccer. All 3 schools have about the same average and median performance, but some of them are more consistent. So school B is going to be really consistently like pretty good, and then school A sometimes is going to be the best, and then sometimes it's going to be the worst. And so that's what this shows here. And then finally, we have a scatter plot, which is one of the most useful in engineering. And it's used to show like data correlations or the relationship between 2 different data things, or sometimes more than 2, but often you have 2 different variables you want to look at how they relate. So that's the sort of typical like independent variable on the x-axis, dependent variable on the y-axis, and then you can see make some kind of trend line, maybe, which we'll go over in a future video, and see how those things relate. So this is something that if you just collect a bunch of data and you're like, I don't know, I want to look at these 2 variables, you probably want a scatter plot. So how might we do it? Just to wrap up this section here, we're going to make a couple of plots. So one is to just make a bar plot. Go ahead and highlight the data. So you're going to start on your table, go up to Insert, go to the charts are all over here in this like chart section. Excel will recommend you some, but usually you probably know what you want. When you look in here are bar charts. I want just the basic one. And now we have that same chart. And I can edit the title by just double clicking on it and go ahead and make it a better title. And you can see because I highlighted all of this, it automatically was like, okay, you're making a bar chart. You probably want this like first column to be the labels, and then the second column to be your actual numbers for the data. So that's what Excel automatically assumed, and it got our categories for us that way. For a scatter plot, you would do a similar thing, and I can just type in like done here, and it'll say good. Hey. For scatter plot, you can go ahead and highlight it, do the same thing, go to Insert, find the scatter here, and go ahead and make that. And instead of assuming like that we want, categories and numbers like this, it's going to say, okay, your first variable is going to be your x-axis, your second column is going to be your y-axis, and it'll just assume that that's what we want. And so we can go ahead and edit the title to make sure that they line up. Velocity is in meters per second. And that's how we make just a basic scatter plot. And it just takes all these points that we have here and sticks them on that graph. Okay, so we know how to make a plot, but how do we make it look nice? So again, this same example, I can go ahead and highlight these and insert a chart. But now what we're saying is we want some axis labels, right? We want to know what is happening on each axis because this on its own doesn't have a lot of information. So the way to do that is to either use this plus that comes up when you highlight the chart, or go into this chart design at the top. Oops, double clicked it to show you and it went away, and add chart element. And these kind of do the same thing. You can also right click on it and find, there's a chart elements somewhere in here. You can format the chart and you'll add stuff that way. But sometimes this one's nice because you can just check things off and say, yes, I would like axis titles, please. And do I want both? It says both. Yeah, I want both. Great. So I can go edit that. Double click on it or click into it and say time with units, seconds. The parentheses indicates that that's your unit. Velocity in meters per second. And then my title is still just velocity. We're not going to want to keep that because that's the same as the y-axis, but that's recreating this chart. So yeah, what's up with the title? Why is it just kind of the same as velocity? That's pointless. So I can go ahead and highlight. Again, we'll make another one. Show you this a few times. And this time, when we add the axis titles, those will still be the same, but we're going to go ahead and change that title to be something more descriptive because on its own, the title should be able to tell us some information. And what this one's right now is telling us is just what the y-axis is, which is pointless. But where did this data come from? Oh, it was from an acceleration test in a vacuum. And that now we have a lot more information about what's going on here. Spelled acceleration wrong. Than just what the variables are. So we're like, oh, like title slide, what's happening? We tested this weight in a vacuum and how it accelerates. Great. Okay, so doing it again, but now we have two data sets, right? This is where things start to get a little more interesting than just like one set of dots, is now we have two. And you can color code automatically is one way to differentiate. So if you just highlight all of it, again, Excel is going to say that first column must be your x-axis, and then any other columns after, for a scatter plot, you probably just want to plot them all as different series. And you see here it said series 1 and series 2. It didn't know what to call them. That's because I highlighted just the data. If I go ahead and redo this chart, but I highlight the titles of those columns as well, which often you will have, then it should, there we go, assume that, oh, the top of that column is probably what your different colors are going to be. So it filled that in for us, which is nice. The legend check mark is here. It put one in automatically because we have two things, but if you didn't get it, this is how you would add it. It just kind of moves it around sometimes. I can add access titles again. And yeah, you just have to keep typing out access titles over and over again. The reason why is that you should never really have a graph that doesn't have access titles, because otherwise it's completely meaningless. Without those labels, nobody knows what a graph says. So if you ever start showing people graphs without labels, they should get mad at you for not communicating well. So that wasn't so bad. We've got our two different things, and my legend's in a different place, but that's okay. Maybe we can get it to move around. And maybe stretch this back out pretty close. So what if someone is colorblind? Or what if you print your graph in black and white? Right now, this little like, okay, we have two different colors for two different sets of data doesn't work, because look at this. It's really hard to tell from this guy what the difference is. Maybe like I can say Earth is a little darker, and so it's probably that one, but it's really difficult to tell. And you might have this get printed in black and white. You might have someone who can't see the difference between the colors. And so checking the black and white is always a good way to tell, am I communicating clearly and accessibly? And that's really important thing to consider. So another thing we can do is, instead of just relying on colors, we can change the shape of our markers so that they have different shapes instead of both being those round dots. In this example, we're showing you triangles for one of them. The way that I can do this is go into my markers that I want to change and just go ahead and double click on them. This thing will pop up. We'll go over to that paint bucket here, click on marker, and then we can edit a bunch of whole things about the marker. There's marker options. And so maybe we want it to be a different type of marker. Oh, I have to switch it to let me choose something there. So if I do automatic, it'll pick it. Switch it to built-in. I can make it a triangle. I can see there. Those are the same as that, but maybe we think they're a little small. You can also go ahead and change the size if you like. You can pick a whole bunch of different shapes if you like. But yeah, maybe you want them to be bigger. Maybe you think now this one needs to be bigger. You can kind of mess around with that. And now they maybe looks a little nicer. So if we put this in black and white, it's going to be a lot easier to tell the difference between this Earth and Mars down here. And to close off, now that we've done all the examples, done. Some types of charts that you shouldn't use are pie charts. They appear a lot in especially the business world, but they're usually not a good way to communicate your data. So look, if you feel yourself wanting to put in a pie chart, you can go ahead and look up, what do I do instead of a pie chart? And you'll find a bunch of stuff out there, because pie charts are bad at communicating different category sizes, because they do angles instead of like a rectangle, which is much easier to look at on a bar chart. You should never use the scatter with smooth lines. That's this, scatter, this one here, because it puts in these like automatic smooth lines that lie about where your data goes. It makes it look like you have some data that you don't actually have. And so you shouldn't use that. Otherwise, you're lying about your data. You should use straight lines to connect your dots if you have to have a line in there. And then finally, don't use the 3D charts. They may be like, for like a bar chart, there's this 3D bar